This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
And hello, my dear friends. Welcome to the Dr. Sem Yankees show. Today, it's not the Dr. Sem Yankees show. Today, it's going to be the Dr. Sem book show with my friend, Phil Coffin. We are going to talk about his great book, A Baseball Book of Days. But let me remind everyone that this program is brought to you by Artemisia Publishing. Artemisia is a traditional independent publisher located in New Mexico in the great United States of America. They have published many of my books. They have a new book that I wrote that will come out next February. Stay tuned for more details. And of course, they have my wonderful book, the award-winning The Least Among Them, which talks about the Yankees who played in just one game. And there's a great tie-in to my book in Phil Coffin's great book, A Baseball Book of Days. I wish we had 5 hours because there's so many great stories that Phil has to tell and that I want to ask him to tell about, but we only have 30 minutes. So let's not spend any more time talking, and let's bring in my good friend, Phil Coffin. Phil, how are you?
I'm great, Paul. Thanks for having me here today.
Oh, it's always great. It's always great. So just give us a little background. Tell us about the premise and what the Baseball Book of Days is all about.
The Baseball Book of Days is sort of an advent calendar of baseball, where you have players and events that I tie to a specific date. And so we sort of go through the year on picking out dates where you can find this slice of history or personality of the game, and tell some of the distinctive and wonderful history of the game.
And what do you say in the introduction? I love this. I never outgrew the idea of baseball being stories and things like this, even as I became more educated, but I'm still basically a fan like I was at the age of 8 when I spent so much time looking at the back of baseball cards. And I'm obviously paraphrasing a little bit there, but I think we always retain that 8-year-old inside us, that fervor, that love that brought us to the game in the first place. No?
I think you're right. And I think that's one thing that is distinctive about baseball. I think that when we come to the game at an age like that, there is something about it that's sort of magical in a different way than football or basketball. And it never goes away. And even though our approach to the game, our passion for the game, our interest in players or teams may change, there's still that slice of baseball in us that is a little bit of magic. And the stories of the game, which are unlike those in other sports, I believe, just makes it something that you want to hang on to as you go through life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think baseball, look, we're baseball fans. We're probably biased, but I look even in the newspapers, online, ESPN and all that, there don't seem to be as many great stories about any of the other sports. And baseball just seems to be replete with them. They just continue on and on. You reference so many books that you have loved in your text here, that perpetuate the stories and perpetuate the game. Why don't you share with us some of those baseball books that really impacted you?
Well, I've always loved Ball 4 by Jim Bouton. It was not the first baseball diary of a season. Jim Brosnan had one, The Long Season, a decade before. But Bouton's book is just a wonderful read, and it takes you behind the scenes in a way, and lets you see ball players as they really were as they were going through the course of a season. And it had never been done like that before. And every couple of years I reread it because it's just so much fun. I really am a fan of the Bill James historical baseball abstracts. There are 3 editions of it, and they're somewhat different. Of course, I have all three because they kept changing and I kept finding new things. But it's a mix of statistics and a statistical analysis, which, of course, Bill James is known for. I mean, he is the godfather of sabermetrics. But he also has lots of little stories about the game, and he goes decade by decade through baseball history. And that mix of stories and statistics, I think, is just fabulous.
And humor.
Yes, yeah, he has a definite point of view and a definite sense of humor. I also love Joe Posnanski's The Baseball 100, which is his take on the greatest 100 ball players in the game, and he ranks them from 100 to 1. He first compiled this online, and the comments
And he
from
never
readers.
finished. He
Never
never finished the online list.
He did. I mean, he actually had a couple of tries at this. The first pass, you're right, he did not finish, but he eventually did finish 100 to 1, and that became the book. And each one is an essay on these great players. Of the, what is that, 11 or 12,000 players who played the game in the major leagues. The top 100 that's a pretty fine slice. So there are no bad ball players, and there really aren't any bad stories. And the other book that I really think was fundamental for me was Only the Ball Was White by Robert Peterson, which I think was written in the late 1970s, but it was the first real appreciation of Negro League baseball and the history of black baseball. And it opened my eyes. I thought I was pretty knowledgeable about baseball, but I came to find out that there was this whole chapter of baseball that had kind of been put to the side by Major League Baseball, that was just remarkable in its depth and its flavor, and its great ball players. And Peterson's book, Only the Ball Was White, opened up my eyes to that. And now I have like 15 or 20 Negro League books in my library at home because I just think the subject is such a fascinating one.
Posnanski is the soul of the game about Buck O'Neil is just one of the best.
Yes,
love that book.
It's a great read too. And I mean, that's again personality and stories.
Absolutely. Now let's go through your book a little bit. The first chapter is on Herb Washington. Okay, I want to get to the stuff that ties into the Yankees maybe a little bit more. And chapter 2, I love this. It's in the best interest of baseball. One of those. This all happened just before I became a fan. If I'd been a fan at the time and older, but I would have been outraged. Why don't you talk to us a little about when the Yankees got Vita Blue and Bowie Kuhn nixed it all?
Yes, this was in the mid-'70s, just after free agency had come in. Charlie Finley, the Maverick owner of the Oakland Athletics, concluded that he could not compete financially with the large market teams. Some things repeated in baseball history. And so he decided that he would sell off the stars or trade off the stars of his mid-'70s Oakland dynasty. And among those was Vita Blue going to the Yankees. He was also trying to make deals with the Red Sox. Joe Rudy was one of the players who was going to be traded away. And Bowie Kuhn stepped in over the course of several transactions that were going to reward Finley with millions of dollars, and said, no, you can't do this. This is not in the best interest of baseball. And there is this best interest of baseball clause that has been invoked periodically over the decades by various commissioners. And Kuhn sort of magically came up with a figure of $400,000 that you couldn't buy a player for more than $400,000. Otherwise, it was not in the best interest of the game. The rich teams would buy up all the good players, and competitive balance would be unsettled. So you had, at one point, these players had gone to their new teams. They were sitting waiting for the commissioner's approval of their contracts. And yet they were told, no, Joe Rudy, you can't play for the Red Sox. No, Vita Blue, you can't pitch for the Yankees. And they wound up being returned to Oakland. And Finley really, he wound up losing players to free agency because he was not about to pay the salaries that the players wanted. What I found interesting in all this was if you'd gone back half a century earlier,
I love this.
There was no best interest of baseball clause. So the Red Sox sell Babe Ruth to the Yankees for an unbelievable amount of money for 1920, and the sale goes through, and as we know, it changes baseball history. The Yankees become the dominant team. Within 3 years, Yankee Stadium is opened. That's a new approach to baseball stadiums. Babe Ruth is larger than life in American culture, let alone the sport. And the Red Sox become a doormat for decades. Had the same rules of 1970 been in effect in 1920, Babe Ruth would never have been allowed to be sold to the Red Sox in that transaction. And if that sale doesn't go through, baseball history is radically different.
And you make the point on page 16, the Red Sox acquired 21 players, none of whom amounted to much because it wasn't just Babe, as you note. The Yankees, meanwhile, snagged such stars as Carl Mays, Waite Hoyt, Wally Shang, Bullet Joe Bush, Sad Sam Jones, Everett Scott, and Joe Dugan. And of course, that's in addition to Babe Ruth. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, you look at those transactions, and it was basically half of the everyday lineup and their starting rotation. So it's a remarkable transformation of the team, and then the transformation of baseball.
Exactly. Now, Chapter 8, you talk. This has nothing to do with the Yankees, but it's just. I love the way you write. I love your humor. I love the little fun things in here. Chapter 8's about Jackie Robinson, April 15th. And you talk about, do you remember the book, The Great American Bubblegum Baseball?
Oh, yeah.
I
have it right here.
Oh, that's awesome. The last page in that book is a baseball card of Sibby Sisti, as I recall. And it said, "Good night, Sibby Sisti, wherever you are," right? Well,
yes.
In this chapter, you go through the whole lineup of both teams.
Well, yeah. I mean, I was.
This is great.
Well,
and I love the part about Sibby Sisti, shortstop, 27 from Buffalo, New York. Sisti was called Sibby because his given name was Sebastian. Sibby played in the infield at times with Nanny Fernandez, given name Frolian, and Connie Ryan Cornelius. Sibby, Nancy, and Connie should be a song. That's just great.
Yes. I mean, you don't have nicknames like that anymore.
It's just so much fun. You read this and you know, listen, I read a ton about baseball. I love baseball. But when sometimes there are books and they're great, but they're less fun to go page by page. Your books are fun. The book on the 1959 Topps, there's just great stories. And we talked about that about a year or so ago. Then let's move to April 19th. Again, not a Yankee story, but it's Boston and Patriots Day and the marathon.
Right.
And talk a little about that because it's so much fun.
Well, I'm a runner as you are, so the Patriots Day connection in Boston is really meaningful to me because Patriots Day is a holiday in Massachusetts and a couple other states now, and the Boston Marathon was always on Patriots Day, and for many years it was on April 19th. Now it's the third Monday in April, and it's great because they start in the Boston suburb of Hopkinton and run 26.2 miles into the heart of downtown Boston, but they go right past Fenway Park. And it's an enormous holiday in Boston. And fans come out of the ballpark and watch the runners coming by. And it's been like this for many, many decades. And so it's sort of this combination of holiday and baseball. Baseball is an adjunct to the marathon, but it's unlike anything anywhere else in baseball. And having run the Boston Marathon a few times, you see the Citgo sign at Fenway Park, and you can see it for miles, and you think, "Oh my God, it is not getting closer." And then you find there's Fenway Park, and it's a ballpark, so it's beautiful. And you're going by, and you have about a mile to go, and it's energizing to see that Citgo sign and actually pass it at last. So to me, it's a wonderful convergence of these two elements that make Boston what it is.
That's awesome. I didn't know you'd run. How many times have you done Boston?
I've run Boston 3 times.
Oh, I am jealous. I've never qualified. Quick story. I needed to go 3:15 in order to qualify. This is a couple of decades, like 2006. I ran 3:25 in Chicago. The next year I did Marine Corps, and I was training hard. And I'm like, I'm running this race and I'm going to qualify. This is going to be my BQ. I'm going to pull it off. And I ran a great race. Ended up at 3:30, which is fast, especially for me.
That's 8-minute miles.
Yeah, it was good, but it wasn't good enough. And my family was there, and they did a marathon of themselves. My wife and 3 little boys at the time, jumping on and off the metro to see me at all different spots. And I remember in Crystal City, my middle son, Alex, he's sitting there and he's cheering me on. And I stopped and kissed them all and said, "Oh, I love you guys." And he's like, "Run." And I said, "Alex, it's not happening. I'm off the pace. I can't make it. I'll never make it up the time. I'm getting killed here." And he's so sweet. He cried. Right there. My little 9-year-old boy, he's crying like, "Dad." I was like, I'll make it. I never did. Then they keep making it harder and harder.
It's not too late.
I think it is. But you never know. May 25th, you talk about Babe Ruth again and his last hurrah. And tell us about that last home run he hits.
Well, it's at this point in his career, this is 1935, and Ruth was really starting to decline, and he'd worn out his welcome with the Yankees. I mean, he was always a handful, and when you're a handful and not hitting, you're dispensable. Ruth had designs on becoming the Yankees manager, and the Yankees ownership had no interest in his becoming the manager. But how do you get rid of the biggest icon in the sport? But they found a team, the Boston Braves, willing to take on Ruth, and they sort of said, "Well, you'll be the assistant manager too." And so the Braves needing they were terrible, and they needed all the drawing cards they could get, acquire Ruth. And he's 40 years old, and he's fat, and he's out of shape, and he's not hitting. But on May 25th, he winds up hitting not 1, not 2, but 3 home runs. And the last one is just titanic. The players talked about how it was the longest home run they'd seen. And in the movie version, Babe Ruth would have hit the 3rd home run and then said, "I retire." But it didn't happen that way. He continues with the team for several more games, never gets the ball out of the infield again.
I love that part.
Which is, growing up, you hear the stories. Babe Ruth hit 3 home runs in his last game. Well, he didn't. The last game in which he hit home runs, he hit 3. And it's kind of a sad denouement for a player whose, career just spells greatness. That to think that, here he has this moment where suddenly he finds it all again, and then reality sets back in, even for Babe Ruth.
Yeah. And you know what? Not everyone goes out with a bang. There's very few Ted Williamses in this world.
Yes. Exactly.
Here's another example of your great sense of humor and creativity and why this book is so engaging and fun. June 21, The Boys of Summer and the Summer Boys. And you list a whole bunch of guys: Ed Summers, Tax Summers, Champ Summers, Kid Summers, Don August, June Green. I mean,
Yeah.
Gerald June Perry. It's just so much fun. You don't know that each chapter what kind of curveball you're going to throw us, what's going to be so much fun or interesting, and which of these chapters was your favorite to write? I mean, that's a silly question, but
Well, I think the one that I really enjoyed, there were two for vastly different reasons. One was the Moonlight Graham chapter.
that's the next one, June 29th.
June 29th. And I'm sure most of your viewers remember Moonlight Graham from the Field of Dreams. Played one game, never got to bat. And there really was a Moonlight Graham. There was an Archibald Doc Moonlight Graham. And in real life, in 1905, he got to play one game for the New York Giants and never came to bat. An author named Bill Kinsella stumbled across his line in the Baseball Encyclopedia, is fascinated by it, does some research, and makes him a focal point of part of his great book, Shoeless Joe, which then becomes Field of Dreams. So I love the story. I love the movie. The novel is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, how many Moonlight Grahams were there? And with the help of Baseball Reference, I found that there were 64, not counting pitchers who just, I thought, well, let's stick with position players, because there could be many pitchers who, of course, never get to bat. And Moonlight Graham's story is wonderful. There's no question about it. But some of the other Moonlight Grahams of the game their stories are even better. One of my favorites was a guy named, he played under the name Jack Smith, but his real name was Jack Coffey, and he was using an alias because he'd been convicted of theft, and he was supposed to be incarcerated at this point, but he winds up somehow being out, and he is one of a group of scabs recruited by the Detroit Tigers to play against the Philadelphia Athletics. Tigers their players had struck because Ty Cobb had been suspended by the American League for going into the stands to beat up a fan who'd been heckling him. And so Jack Smith, or Jack Coffey, gets to play this a small part of this one game that is like the biggest farce game in Major League history. And so he has his Moonlight Graham moment. But another one that is really fanciful, you couldn't make this up. There was a catcher in 1914 with the Pirates named Sam Brannigan, and he was apparently a very good hitter and a very lackadaisical receiver. So he gets into a game in 1914, late in the game, and he doesn't chase a pass ball, and he doesn't go after a wild pitch. He gets hit on the meat hand with a pitch and splits his finger. And for years, apparently in baseball, that kind of injury was called pulling a Brannigan, but for Sam Brannigan. But he has so little effort on the field that his manager pulls him after like an inning, and he never plays Major League Baseball again. And a headline on one of the newspaper stories said, this is the way it actually read: loafs himself out of Major League. And that was Sam Brannigan. He was too lazy to chase after a wild pitch or a pass ball and ruined his Major League career. And he played in the minor leagues for a while after that, and he never got over being a lazy oaf. And when he finally was released for the last time, he said, "The devil must be in me, and everything is going wrong."
That's unbelievable. Great. You know what? You have not read this, I don't think. When I see you next week, I'm gonna bring you a copy. Because those are the Moonlight Grahams of the Yankees, and you mentioned a whole bunch of them in there because I have some pictures too. One of my favorites who you mentioned is catcher Homer Thompson. He played for a minute, and the cool thing about Homer was his brother Tommy was a pitcher on that same team. Tommy played in
Oh, really?
4 major league games.
Wow.
And yeah, they had a pitcher catcher battery, but this was like 1913, and nobody really cared about that. So they put Homer in the game to catch. They didn't bring Tommy in to pitch. It would have been so cool. That would have been the greatest thing ever. And they didn't do it. But when I come next week, I'm going to bring you one.
That reminds me of a story that is in an earlier chapter. We talked earlier about Jackie Robinson's first game, April 15th. And one of his teammates was Dixie Walker, who did not want to be playing with a black man. So I thought, the way my brain works, how many Dixies were there in baseball? And there were a dozen, as it turned out, who played in the major leagues. And one of the fun things to me that ties in here is there were actually 2 guys named Dixie Howell who played Major League Baseball. They were both from Kentucky. They were about the same age. They played at the same time. And for a season, they were battery mates. And there were, I think, 4 games in which Dixie Howell pitched to Dixie Howell, which must have confused newspaper editors everywhere.
That's great. And again, this whole book, we're already at 27 minutes. It goes too fast. My dear friends, the book is A Baseball Book of Days by Phil Coffin. 31 moments that transformed the game. You need to get yourselves a copy. You need to read it. It's great. It's wonderful. And you're just going to have fun. And you don't have to read it in order, because there is no real order. It's their days. It's like an advent calendar, as Phil said in the beginning. Highly recommended. Get yourself a copy. Ladies and gentlemen, Phil, first, thank you so much for sticking around. As the outro plays, stick around with me, and then we can talk afterwards for a minute. Everyone else, make each day great. Look for the good. Cherish the good. Perpetuate the good. Give it away. Find good things. Give it to others. When we give love, when we give kindness, when we give respect, it comes back to us in greater amounts than we ever gave. But that's not why we give the goodness and give happiness and love. It's because it's the right thing to do. Make your day great. Phil, you helped make my day today great. Thank you, everybody, for watching. This has been the Dr. Sem Show, and we'll see you here next Saturday morning at 7 a.m. Thank you.
Introducing National Streaming Sports, live and on-demand sports talk programming that you can access 24/7. For the premier sports talk experience, tap into our Roku channel. Start your mornings with Mac and Jack covering all the weekend sports action. Then pour a cup and enjoy all the sports you can drink on the Coffee and Sports podcast. At midday, talk sports from east to west on the Coast to Coast podcast. Followed at night by some hot girl talk with Prim and Proper Sports featuring Sonia Pearson. Talk boxing on the Gloved Fist. Yankee fans tune in for Start Spreading the News. And there's more on the College Sports Huddle and Sports Scope with Robert Butler. There are 20 podcasts in all and 70 weekly shows giving us a 3.4-star viewer rating. To find us on Roku TV, search for National Streaming Sports on the Roku search bar. Click on the logo and you're in. National Streaming Sports, live and on-demand sports talk for